Good evening, dear viewers, and welcome to a new episode of the Daily Debate. I'm your host for tonight, Mohammed Abdelrahim. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has intensified his efforts to strengthen political relations between Egypt and African countries, recognizing the strategic importance of regional cooperation for Egypt's development and for the continent's development. Since taking office, the president has focused on enhancing diplomatic ties, fostering economic partnerships, and promoting security collaboration across the continent. Recently, the president received the South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. The meeting focused on strengthening bilateral ties between Egypt and South Africa, particularly in areas of mutual interest such as trade, investment, and regional stability. And we all know the role that South Africa is playing in the Gaza crisis. We'll be talking about Egypt's role in Africa. Egypt, the cornerstone of stability in this part of the world, the heart really of the world, with a special look at the latest developments in Gaza and the Egyptian role there, as the hottest spot in the world. And we are delighted to have with us in the studio Dr. Milad Momtaz, the international relations expert. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Momtaz.
Pleasure is mine.
Dr. Momtaz, please allow us, dear viewers, as we always do, first to watch a report about our main topic for tonight, and then we'll come back and start our discussion again. Egypt's pioneering role in Africa and, of course, in this part of the world, the cornerstone of stability in this part of the world, with a special look at the latest developments in Gaza.
Egypt, under leadership of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, continued the efforts aimed at strengthening relations with African countries for being a top priority in the country's foreign policy. Egypt has been seeking to have an active role in various mechanisms of joint African action, as President al-Sisi is keen to enhance the country's presence in Africa through paying several visits to African states and signing many bilateral agreements in different fields. After assuming the African Union's presidency in 2019, Egypt has maintained cooperation with all African countries and positively responded to the developments in Africa. While Egypt moves ahead with building the new republic, the country gives a top priority in its foreign policy to defending the interests of the African continent and working to achieve the aspirations of African peoples for a better future. President al-Sisi has always been calling in his speeches at all conferences and summits for mobilizing the international community's efforts to support development in Africa. The President reiterated this call during his meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the sidelines of the second U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, where he emphasized the African continent is in need of support from major countries to build a strong continental infrastructure for the success of African development efforts. During the U.S.-Africa Summit, the head of state reviewed Egypt's vision to achieve food security for Africa amid the current global food crisis. Egypt's plan to achieve food security for Africa includes establishing mechanisms to reduce the debt burden through exemption, exchange, or easy payment, and intensifying agricultural investments directed to Africa through the transfer of modern technologies on easy terms, as well as keeping global trade open. He also called for providing support by major countries to help African states maximize the benefit from the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA, in the areas of infrastructure and agriculture.
Welcome back, dear viewers. Thanks to Manal Al-Ibyari and Khaled Abdelbari for this report. Now, a key topic of discussion in His Excellency the President's meeting with the South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Naledi Pandor, was the Palestinian cause, with both sides reaffirming their commitment to supporting Palestinian rights and advocating for a just and lasting solution to the conflict, and emphasizing the importance of coordinated African efforts to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and to promote peace and stability in the region. This, of course, is happening at a time when Israel has broken the ceasefire since the dawn of Tuesday, killing nearly 600 Palestinians, mostly civilians and mostly women and children, at a time when it also had prevented the entrance of humanitarian aid, contrary to the signed accord of Jan 19th that was enforced by U.S. President Donald Trump. With us here in the studio is Dr. Milad, the international relations expert. I want to start really, Dr. Momtaz, by what's happening in Gaza and posing this question. It was Mr. Trump who enforced the deal on the Israeli Prime Minister. But it seems that it is also Mr. Trump that allowed for the deal to be zilch, no deal. Israel can do whatever it wants. It can make the choice it wants. And they want a new deal, a Witkoff proposal, the proposal that was not accepted by Hamas, the release of a certain number of hostages for an extension of a ceasefire. Hamas insisted of going back to the deal signed by Mr. Trump and the mediators, Egypt and Qatar. And now Israel is back to war.
Sadly enough, okay, we need to discuss this and break it down. First of all, okay, what we heard during the presidential campaign from Mr. Trump, that he was talking about peace and stopping all wars around the world. And I think it's time to ask this question: do you really mean it? If you truly mean this, you should have stopped Israel going back to war, which stopped on Jan 19th, as you said. However, the situation is totally different nowadays. What we've been witnessing the last couple of days is that we are back to square number one. And if you may actually, if I may put it more accurately, I think we're back to square zero, not even square one. Because square one means a launching pad, a starting point, a feasible one that we can build on. However, what we've been witnessing, that it's like a new start, but not in a positive manner, in a very negative way, unfortunately. And namely, unfortunately for our brethren in Gaza, unfortunately. Okay, hundreds of people got killed, as you said. The number is not confirmed yet.
Many children.
Yeah. And then, okay,
and some UN officials as well.
The thing I'd like actually to focus on, because that's a huge topic, that Washington has never talked about Palestinians and the death toll of Palestinians and wanted on their side, the Palestinian side. They always talk about the hostages. We respect human beings, we respect human rights whatsoever around the world. However, your talk, I'm talking about the talk that comes from Washington, D.C., I think it should be balanced. It shouldn't be actually one-sided, talking only about the hostages. Yeah, hostages are human beings.
You just reminded me, Dr. Momtaz, of what former U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, used to say when he said, like, far too many Palestinians have been killed, or like that, this number is more than than it should be. He said something like that. So as if there was a number that is acceptable of civilian loss, but there is another number that is not acceptable. Now, from this administration, although it enforced peace, or it enforced the ceasefire, we don't hear even these words. We don't hear any condemnation of civilian loss of life.
Totally agree. Okay, my point, simply speaking, that is what the previous administration, Mr. Biden's administration, as you said, at least they would touch on this. Reluctantly, I get it, as you said, not mentioning exact numbers, and even, because I still recall this, that they used to say that, okay, you know, okay, some organizations, okay, exaggerate about the numbers of actually Palestinians who got killed. I still recall this from before. Nowadays, nothing at all. Nothing, and we mean it.
All we heard is like from the U.S. Administration is that they saw horrific pictures. Or
on which side? Okay, if you are accurate enough, if you want to actually be balanced, and if you want to be professional, as we mean it diplomatically speaking, maybe we get to talk about that later on. I'm talking about professionalism in diplomacy, in doing diplomacy.
But how can you be the United States, the world's superpower, the world's lone superpower, the world's supposedly the defender of human rights and freedom and justice, and not respect your word? I mean, this is really hard for me to understand. You're the expert, please, because there was a word, there was a signing, there was an accord. How can I not respect the deal I enforced? This is the question I'm posing to the U.S. administration.
Okay, my mind, okay, I'm sorry, I got some objections. First of all, okay, the word respect, does it exist there in the United States of America? I'm talking about, okay, the new administration. Okay, secondly, we're talking about, okay, that human rights. I need to pose this kind of question to the new administration. Could you please define human rights? What is your perception of human rights? Because what we've been seeing in Washington the last couple of weeks since he came to power, I think that's pretty confusing when it comes to the solid definition of the term human rights. Because we get very mixed and confusing messages from Washington, D.C. regarding human rights. For example, not respecting human rights of people in Canada, because he has been talking about taking over Canada and making Canada
the 51st state.
Does that make sense, even from a human rights point of view? Because you're not respecting their will.
International law.
International law. But I'm talking about, okay, the term or the expression itself of human rights, what I'm afraid of, that has changed. And actually, you know, that's not okay, because the system that we have been talking about nowadays in the world, it's been in place since 1945. Because what about the war ended 1945, UN 1945, then 1948, the Human Rights Declaration of Human Rights, and you know, the
Geneva
subsequent,
Convention,
the subsequent accords afterwards. So the thing here is that, and I'd like to get back to your question about human rights and respect, and why wouldn't they respect their word?
Respect your own signature.
Totally agree. Because
we've heard His Excellency President Sisi and other Arab leaders saying they are ready to work and they are looking forward to work with Mr. Trump for peace in the region. The question is now, Mr. Trump, who portrayed himself as a man of peace as soon as he came in and forced a deal and halted the bloodshed and eased the suffering, he helped ease the suffering of the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Now he's the one backtracking from his own word, his own promise, his own signature. So can we really look forward to working with Mr. Trump for peace now? Has he lost the image that he portrayed for himself as a man of peace?
Okay, my understanding goes like that. We have to work with him. Okay, to me, that's not optional. So we have to. And we have to figure out our ways regarding this. You know, navigating the ways, okay, because it's, you know, it's like turbulent water. To me, nowadays, it's like a turbulent ocean, open water, which like, okay, filled with uncertainties everywhere. And this kind of scene is unprecedented. And that takes us back to the word, I think, 1930s, before 1939, before the Second World War, okay, erupted in 1939. Uncertainties were everywhere. Are we back to this kind of thing?
We're looking for Noah's Ark. We are looking for Noah's Ark in this turbulent world.
Okay,
now.
And another ironic thing I'd like to share it with you, with everyone, that what Mr. Donald Trump is seeking the Nobel Peace Prize. And that's so ironic to me. What kind of peace? And that's back to your question once again. Do you really mean peace in the Middle East? Do you really mean peace between Israelis and Arabs and Palestinians? We need.
Do you really mean peace in Ukraine? between Russia and Ukraine? That's another question.
Exactly. Do you actually mean peace in Europe between actually Europeans and Russians? Okay, again, in the Central America. I'm talking about Panama and actually the other countries. So I'm talking about his view. We need actually to take a look, you know, and we need to know more about his way of thinking regarding this. You know, and of course, you know about this. When it comes to a negotiating table and doing diplomacy, we need to figure out that person's way of thinking. I need to know, I need to see this.
The rhetoric so far from Mr. Trump and from the Israelis is the hostages. We're doing this to release the hostages. We're pressuring Hamas to release the hostages. The question is, has there been any hostages that were freed by Israeli attacks, or were the hostages freed when there was a deal and exchange of prisoners? That's first question. Second question is, what if, indeed, what if, and Hamas has already offered this, to go for a big deal, okay?
Yeah.
All the hostages, all the prisoners of war, end the war. All the hostages for ending, and the Americans. So, what if Israel does get all of its hostages? Will we still, judging by the fact that even the U.S. didn't respect its signature, not only the Israelis, we know the Israelis never. There's a history between Egypt and Israel, between the Arab world and Israel. Israel has never respected its word or its signature. But now what's new is that the Americans also are not respecting their promise or their word. So do we have any guarantee that even if the Israelis, and everybody wants the hostages to go back, I mean, but okay, they are back, they are free, they are home with their loved ones, what happens next? Will we still see barbaric Israeli aggression against the Palestinians, breaking all charters of the Geneva Convention and committing all war crimes possible with the blessing of the U.S. administration?
What I'm afraid of is the issue of hostages, to me, is like a justification. Because, okay, we've seen, you know, the last couple of days, the families of hostages going against the Prime Minister, the Israeli Prime Minister. And some of them got killed. I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
So, because of the heavy
bombardment,
disproportion, bombardment of, Gaza. So, and this actually takes us back to the 15-month, you know, the ongoing, actually, conflict. I don't think that his attack on Gaza meant basically to set those people free. It's about destroying the infrastructure and the capabilities of Hamas. And the main question that I think we need to pose now is that, has he done it? I don't think that, and even, I'm not talking about myself, even some Israeli experts,
True.
They say that,
and we saw missiles from Gaza today,
exactly,
targeting Tel Aviv.
Qassam, from Qassam. So I think in my mind, he should stop, and Washington should stop talking about hostages. You don't really mean it. You don't really want actually hostages back, because they have been risking the lives of those hostages for the last, 17 months now. I think that is a justification. That is a mere lie, unfortunately.
Deducting some ideas from your speech, Dr. Momtaz, are you telling us that the only thing that will change the situation is the inner Israeli scene itself? Because there is movement. You indicate there is something happening in Israeli society. There is not this high rate of approval for the war anymore. In fact, many Israelis are divided now, and many of them don't want their loved ones to go back to war. And we heard the Israeli president today saying something like that. Of course, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who got back to the government as soon as Israel resumed its war, criticize the Israeli president. And we are seeing demonstrations daily, and they are big in numbers. So are you telling us that the only thing that may change the situation is the inner scene inside Israel?
I think that's one of the key factors in my mind. I agree with you on this. I think, you know, Netanyahu is very much afraid to bring an end to the war. He doesn't want to do this because he knows that it will be the end of him, you know, the end of his career whatsoever. And we have seen as well, I think in one of his sessions, he was actually appearing before some court because he is being charged with, I think, numerous number of actually charges, corruption, so many other charges as well. And he doesn't really like this. He does want to do it his way, even inside Israel. He wants actually to lead the country his way, despite the fact that they have been bragging about that it's a democratic country and it is a democratic system. However, we don't see this in action. The other day, he forced the chief of the Shabak to resign, okay, despite the fact that he has been under fire, under huge criticism from so many people in Israel, because the chief of the Shabak, okay, used actually to heavily criticize Netanyahu.
And now even the judicial counselor is threatened to...
as well. So he's trying to get rid of those people who actually dared to criticize him. So it's like the whole situation inside Israel.
So we'll only have Smotrich and Ben Gvir left, but the question is, so why is there a chance that the U.S. administration would take the position of the other side in Israel, the opposition in Israel?
I think, okay, of course, that's a feasible question. However, I don't think so. Why? Because the two leaders actually are of the same type, you know, the same way of thinking, the same mentality. So I think Donald Trump doesn't find it as difficult or challenging to deal with Netanyahu. On the other hand, Netanyahu is more than happy, okay, of the presidential election, you know, and the result, and Donald Trump
the greatest friend to Israel.
Exactly. So I think...
So there is chemistry between the two.
I think. Yeah,
unlike the case when it was Obama Netanyahu, there was no chemistry.
Totally different. Obama actually is a different type of person, you know, and even, you know, his political background and his, you know, I would say intellectual background as well. Because when it comes to intellectuality, I think, you know, there are so many questions about Mr. Donald Trump's mentality when it comes to, you know, the intellectual weight.
But we all know how Mr. Trump is unpredictable. So is there a chance that these two men could collide down the road for whichever reason? I'm talking Trump, Netanyahu.
Theoretically speaking, of course, that is possible. Okay, and we have seen what happened last couple of weeks as he pressured Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire that went into play in January 19th. So I think there is still a possibility. And as you said, Mr. Donald Trump is unpredictable, that has pros and cons. Okay, but when playing politics, when doing this, when doing diplomacy, in my mind, that's very difficult to deal with someone like Donald Trump. On the other hand, we have to deal with him.
Of course.
No way out. It's like one way in, no way out. But we have to figure out. I think it's time for the international community and international diplomacy to come up with new ways, new techniques to deal with it.
Now Egypt has done a big part, the Arab world, we saw the Egyptian plan for the reconstruction of Gaza, France is supporting this plan, Britain is condemning the Israeli resumption of war and the killing of civilians, but is any of this changing anything? And what is the significance now, or the importance of the great Egyptian plan to reconstruct Gaza and to put Hamas out of the picture and to have this independent committee run Gaza and so on? What is the importance of this now at the time of resumption of war, at the time when we don't have a deal, according to Israel and Mr. Trump? Jan 19th deal is no longer there when the atrocities are being committed now day in and day out by the Israelis again.
In my mind, okay, what's been actually, you know, what we've been doing as Egyptians or Arabs regarding this, it's hugely crucial in my mind, because there is still hope. You know, in diplomacy, we have to believe in this. I think it was yesterday as we celebrated the restoration of Taba, the city of Taba, And that is, I think, a very crucial example. I think maybe we can highlight it in a couple of minutes, that what happened back then in 1982, Israel didn't want to give us back Taba. And it took us a couple of years to come to an agreement that we'd go to the international arbitration. Okay, and it was a huge success on our actually side, because we proved it, because we provided, extensive evidence historically, politically, that actually it's our land. And we did it eventually in 1989, and we got it back. So I think what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't give up. We should have our own plans, because actually I still recall Mr. Donald Trump has started actually talking about Gaza and his unapplicable, view of Riviera thingy. He said that, he made it very clear that, okay, we don't have other suggestions, we don't have other plans. Now, on the table, there is the Egyptian plan, and it's very comprehensive, it's highly detailed, okay, it's applicable wholeheartedly. The problem now is that how to convince him, that's what, it's in favor of the United States of America to apply this plan. We need to convince him, in like striking a deal terms. It's like doing business terms. I think Arabs and Egyptians in particular, we have to go to Washington, and we have to have constant, why not we have on a daily basis contacts with them to convince them of our point of view and of the Egyptian plan, because that's very crucial for the time being.
Of course. I mean, and this plan is a very good one, and applicable and realistic and everything. But when war is there, I mean,
what we could do about that?
Okay, let me pose another question. If you were in the position of Hamas, what would you do? Would you accept Mr. Witkoff's plan, another extension of the ceasefire, forget Jan 19th, forget that first deal? Because Hamas so far is insistent on continuing the second phase, going to the second phase, the deal that would eventually end the war. And they don't trust, this trickling of hostages, this extension of ceasefire, because they seemingly believe, and maybe they are right to believe so, is that once we hand over all of the hostages, nothing will change. Nothing will change. Yeah. The Israelis will also continue to occupy Gaza. They will also continue to kill Palestinians. So that's their belief. If you were in their position, what would you do now?
Okay, first of all, we need to understand that Hamas' point of view is that, okay, that they would be out of the scene once they hand over all hostages. They wouldn't be there. They wouldn't have any sort of position.
Not only that, what is the guarantee that Israel would not continue its occupation of Gaza?
I think that's a very feasible question. However, we are in that kind of world nowadays. We don't have guarantees, unfortunately, because the main guarantor, okay, has been the United States of America. And what we see nowadays, they don't want to do this. And all what they care about is striking deals.
And they're talking now to Somaliland.
Which is
so what is the guarantee that the plan to evict Gaza from its inhabitants wouldn't go through?
Again, we are, as I said earlier, okay, that the whole world is filled with uncertainty. We don't know for sure about, okay, what would happen tomorrow or after tomorrow. That is very critical, and that's very important. However, as I said, we still believe in diplomacy. Egyptians actually have been holding on to this, and we shouldn't give up on this by all measures, because the other way around is very dangerous. And the word dangerous even is not actually enough to describe this, because actually that means war. And war is highly devastating. We have been seeing this.
Well, Netanyahu says that he is at war on 7 fronts.
Yeah.
And he's ready to continue. And we're seeing what's happening in Syria, in Lebanon. We're seeing what's happening in the West Bank. So it's not only about Gaza, but it's seemingly about a man who doesn't want peace and who wants to move forward to the great the Israeli dream of of greater Israel.
Israel.
So if this is what we're faced with,
extremely dangerous, as you said, and I agree with this. So the problem with that about, okay, redrawing the map of the Middle East, which is very alarming. Are we at that phase? Are we heading actually for this? Which I think it's a very actually important thing. And I think we
Netanyahu repeats this rhetoric every day.
Yeah, of course.
We're changing the face of the Middle East. This is his most common.
Openly. Nowadays, he is talking openly about changing the face of the Middle East. And actually, Donald Trump has been talking about this implicitly or explicitly as well, which is very dangerous because you're talking about sovereign states in the Middle East and what kind of change or the changes you would wish to see in the Middle East. I think that poses so many questions as well. Going back to Hamas,
nobody would be spared because I believe Israel is also
included.
Of course, but I mean that it wants even some parts of Saudi Arabia. I mean that would be the greater Israel. I mean the greater Israel is to us it's a myth, and we don't believe in it, and of course we will fight it. But it seems this is the mentality now. Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben Gvir.
They're very much convinced of this. And this dream, has been on their minds for decades. We know about this. But they want actually to apply this. They want actually, to do it on the ground, which I think in my mind, that should be stopped as soon as possible. Because actually, and we need to clarify Washington that Arabs will not accept this, because if you don't mind, that the
because
Arab
Greater Israel includes parts of Egypt,
of course,
Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Jordan.
And why wouldn't they expand before?
I don't know if
beyond this.
I don't know if it goes to southern Turkey as well. I'm not sure.
No, you're talking that the original dream of Greater Israel. Why wouldn't they actually expand and take over more lands, if possible, with the help of the United States of America? I think, we are talking about some stuff which is...
From the Nile to the Euphrates.
That's the original dream. We're not actually... We don't know for sure about what would happen next. And what are their... Because they're so greedy and they feel that they're so powerful, they can take over whatever land they want. But regarding...
And they're supported by the world's main superpower.
Going back to Hamas, if you don't mind, I need to ask a simple yet very crucial question. Hamas is the main issue in the Middle East? Because actually when Netanyahu talks and his team in the cabinet, they give us the feeling that it's all about Hamas. And if we get rid of Hamas, everything will be okay. And that's, as I said earlier, it's a lie. By the way, it's beyond Hamas.
He wants to get rid of Hamas, of Iran, of Hezbollah, of Ahmad al-Shara, of I don't know who else, but obviously he wants to get rid of everybody.
Yeah, because actually, psychologically speaking, they are very much like they got to the point as historical way that what they feel that they've been targeted by everyone, they've been persecuted by everyone, and they have to defend themselves by all measures.
I'm sorry to interrupt, and when we say Iran, we will say Iraq as well.
Yeah, of course.
Because we all know the Iraqi government is very much influenced by Iran. Everybody knows.
So if we put all of this, as you said, these names of the countries on the map here, everybody. Take a look at this. So it's like we talk about the eastern side or the eastern wing of the Middle East. And I think that would be like, the first phase of the dream as well, because they don't want. I don't know whether that kind of empire thingy, that they had thousands of years back, is it still on their minds?
It is.
They still believe it's applicable.
It is, Dr. Momtaz.
And they want to bring it into play. I think
it is in the minds of many in Israel.
Yeah, which is, they don't really get the fact that the world has changed. Unfortunately, United States of America, and I have to put it this way, honestly speaking, the backward mentality of the new administration. You see, I use two different words, new and backward. It's like
very interesting.
Yeah, because actually that's what we see in Washington. And when we take a look at what their behavior and the talks of the Secretary of State and the Vice President, I think we were talking, myself and you before the conversation about, the Vice President. He is very ultra traditional, as we describe, such people, ultra backward. He talks about some stuff and some values that I think have disappeared for decades now. What I'm afraid of, as we were talking as well, about the colonial mentality. Is it back? Are we back to that era, like 200, 250 years ago?
Because it's not only, if you allow me to say, Dr. Momtaz and dear viewers, it's not only Trump. It seems that now the U.S. has 1,000 Trumps, 1 million Trumps, 10 million Trumps. So it's not about Mr. Donald J. Trump. It's about the idea itself. It seems the idea now of, colonialism or superiority, domination.
In my mind, that reminds us for sure of nationalism. That was there before, let's say, First World War. We're talking about the first, actually, because actually the war erupted in 1914. Let's say 14 years before the war started, and then before the Second World War. And what I'm afraid of, we are back to that kind of climate.
The Italian and German.
Exactly, Mussolini and those.
Fascism and Nazism.
Exactly. So we are back to nationalism once again. And I need to highlight some important thing that we have been saying in Europe. Unfortunately, he is pushing Europe back to nationalism. That's crucial, that's dangerous, because actually we saw this again before World War I in Europe and Second World War as well.
Mr. J.D. Vance pushed Germany, or openly.
Even he was criticizing actually, the political system in Germany. And that was kind of what, are you interfering to that extent that now we are criticizing each other and the German political system. What I'm afraid of, once again, is that nationalism is back. Nationalism is on the rise across the world, not only in a certain place. Mr. Donald Trump is pushing the whole world into that direction. Are we back to that kind of atmosphere, that kind of thing that actually resulted in First and Second World Wars? He doesn't really care about that.
I want to go back to diplomacy, and we all know about the wisdom and the strength of Egyptian diplomacy and the patience of Egyptian diplomacy and the long-term vision of Egyptian diplomacy. We bear a huge responsibility now, and we're talking wisely. I mean, we want ceasefire, we want reconstruct, we want talks, a path for a just and lasting peace. This is what we're pushing for. This is what we'll continue to push for. But do we have any partners? I mean, where is Europe is talking openly. Yes, okay, we are for long lasting and just peace and a two-state solution and so on. But Europe is unable to confront the U.S. or on all fronts, in Israel, in Ukraine.
I really like the question, because it has to do with so many challenges.
Egypt? Who's helping Egypt?
First of all, I'd address that question. But before we address that question, we need to address something that you said at the beginning. That, we want to do diplomacy, and we know best about this. However, we are being faced with endless challenges. We mean peace, and we do want to do this. However, Egypt is in a very critical situation, and I mean it. That we work, if that, the Prime Minister, Israeli Prime Minister, is talking that he is fighting on 7 different fronts. We have, I think, more than 10 to 15 fronts. Internally and externally. We are very much worried about this because we want to build our country. At the same time, we are surrounded by endless challenges. How would you navigate, once again, the turbulent water? It's like, as you said, Noah's Ark.
We're looking for Noah's Ark.
Exactly. So how would you navigate? I think that is a very critical moment, in our history and the history of the world as well. I'm not exaggerating. We mean it. Because Egypt nowadays, we need actually to develop our country. We have mega projects. We have this, we have that. We respect all of this. However, I need to get back to the word that I care very much about it, and I always actually bring up this word. It's the word stability, and you mentioned that word before. We need this. And once again, I need to address Mr. Donald Trump. What you have been doing, what you have been talking about, does that mean stability to the world? I don't think so. You know, what we've been saying about the relations between the United States of America, and that's not off topic, by the way. What we've been saying about the relations between the United States of America and Canada the last couple of weeks. You know, one of the closest allies to the United States of America, you know, economically, military, you know, it's Canada. And we've been saying what's happening.
You know, Dr. Momtaz, unfortunately we are nearing the end of this very important and interesting discussion. I've really enjoyed being with you. But I want to, as we started with the Egyptian-South African relationship, I want to conclude with it because this was meant the episode was meant to talk about the Egyptian role in Africa. But of course, the events in Gaza and in the Middle East are really overshadowing everything now. I was personally shocked, but what about you, when the U.S. administration said that the South African ambassador in Washington was a persona non grata? How did you receive this, and is this a punishment, some sort of punishment for South Africa for its role in supporting the just Palestinian cause? This great country, South Africa, that suffered from apartheid for decades, and that finally, you know, became the free, democratic country, a huge economic success, a big influence in Africa. So, how did you receive that? We saw how South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice. We always see the coordination, the close coordination between Egypt and South Africa, especially regarding just Palestinian cause. How did you receive that news?
Personally speaking, I was in shock. Okay, because I was expecting that. Because actually, day one, United States of America has been, if I may use this word, you know, wanting to avenge this. They've been wanting to kind of, if I may actually use the word retaliate, because South Africa dared to take Israel to the International Court of Justice. Because it's like actually, you know, it's like telling them, how dare you? How would you defy Israel? And not Israel, how would you defy the United States of America? Because we are right behind Israel. So how would you do that? And even when he came to power, he warned more than once. Okay, he warned South Africa, wanted to scare them to the extent that they withdrew the case from the International Court of Justice. And he was shocked that he was told back then, we are not retreating, we're not going back on this. We are very much convinced, and as you said, that is a just cause. And we're not actually giving up on this. He was shocked, and even to the extent that he started talking about some domestic matters. He was talking about, okay, some law that actually, you know, was made in South Africa about, you know, lands and taking over lands, and how a state actually, you know, see this. And actually, you know, he said that you changed that law. That law is not fair. It goes against human rights. And I was shocked myself. I'm sorry, how dare you actually, because you're talking about human rights in South Africa. Don't you really know about South Africa and what they have been through? And as you said, okay, it's the most important country in modern history fighting for their independence. And now you talk about human rights, okay, in South Africa, and they don't respect human rights. I was shocked. Okay, South Africa not respecting human rights. Okay, okay, what about human rights in the United States of America? What about human rights
South Africa is a great country, a great, beautiful country, and of course, whenever we mention South Africa, we remember the great Nelson Mandela. I mean, we have that great leader of the leader of the 20th century. Really, that's the real man of peace. Finally, and forgiveness and tolerance. Now, finally, Dr. Momtaz, what do you expect in the upcoming days and weeks? Do you expect the war to continue in Gaza, the killing of civilians to continue, or do you expect any breakthrough of the Egyptian diplomacy, the Qatari mediation, anything to change the inner Israeli scene, anything, Mr. Trump changing his mind, I don't know, anything that will bring calm back and bring us back forward to the plan of peace and reconstruction and hold the bloodshed and end the suffering, really, of the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians?
Let me quote Mr. Trump. I use some of his words. Unfortunately, all cards are on the table now. All cards mean that, okay, whatever you pick of the cards, actually, you know, we don't know for sure. And back to the word that I mentioned, uncertainties. What am I hoping that the whole thing would, you know, would stop? Because
We're all hoping for that.
Exactly, Palestinians are suffering. How would we get to that point? I think we need to put more pressure. We need to talk more to what, not the Israelis. I think now it's time to talk to the United States of America.
Thank you very much, Dr. Milad Momtaz. A pleasure as always, international relations expert.
Thank you.
Thank you to viewers for watching us. We still have a report here on the Daily Debate. Please stay with Nile TV.
In the last few months, Egypt has held meetings and contacts with African states that aim to boost bilateral relations, address major challenges that face the continent, especially in Sudan and the Horn of Africa, and cast light on the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD file. Cairo's efforts to protect its interests in the Horn of Africa and the Nile Basin are linked to wider continental goals, which include boosting trade, investment and development potential, says Mohammed Higazi, a former deputy to Egypt's foreign minister. Security in the Red Sea was addressed during a tripartite meeting between Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdelati and his Eritrean and Somali counterparts Osman Saleh and Ahmed Muallim Fiqi. In a joint press conference held after the meeting, Abdelati underlined the need to support security and stability in the Horn of Africa and secure maritime navigation in the Red Sea. Abdelati also expressed Cairo's commitment to Somalia's stability, security and integrity, and support for the government in extending its control over its entire territory and fighting terrorism. The Sudanese crisis topped the three foreign ministers' agenda. Abdelati stressed the commitment of all three states to preserving the unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Sudan and its state institutions. The three ministers also participated in the inaugural meeting of the Trilateral Ministerial Committee. The next Trilateral Committee meeting will take place in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. Abdelati said at the press conference, and arrangements are underway for a trilateral summit at the presidential level. The tripartite meeting built on the foundations laid during President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's visit to Eritrea in October last year, and meetings with his Eritrean and Somali counterparts, Isias Afwerki and Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, during which all three agreed on the importance of cooperation among Red Sea coastal states to maintain security along the vital maritime passage.